Welcome to Writer Syndrome, a podcast about writing from start to finish. This episode, we are talking about writing myths. I'm Russ Capasso. Joining me as always, Tim Ledney. Tim, what's your biggest myth right now?
I don't know. I guess that working in a job will make you happy.
That's a good one.
That you can find that like working a 9 to 5, you can find meaning in your life.
That's a big myth.
I think people pour a lot of their effort into the perfect job and then find themselves at the end of it all being like, wow, I worked a little too much.
Yeah.
Why did I not spend more time with the people I love?
That's a good one. That's
anyway, a little deep.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could put that on bumper stickers too. Why 9 to 5? Why 9 to 5? Question mark. Yeah. So writing.
How about you? Hold on. You got to answer that. You can't just give me a stumper.
No, I totally can. I can absolutely do that to you.
That's baloney.
Yeah.
Let's bring it up a little. Let's talk about writing myths. Let's not be so macabre.
Yeah, writing myths. So this is kind of an interesting one. I've come across, I think this came up because I came across a couple of blog posts every once in a while on the various writing blogs I follow, where you've got someone who's just tossing out the myths of writing, the things that we all hear as people getting into writing and people who are already in writing, that some can be, these negative thoughts, and some are, yeah, I mean, I guess that's mostly what they are, right? Just
I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to talking about it because a lot of those I don't think are myths. I think they're actually true. Some of them.
Yeah. I agree. So I pull up like 5 or 6 different, just do quick Google searches as I usually do, and a couple different articles. It's interesting to see. There's definitely a couple that are common across the board. Should we go over the common ones first and see what we think about them, and then
I don't mind going over some other folks. I think that we should make sure that we in our resources just link to where we grabbed them at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give those folks shout outs. I came up with my own list.
Okay. All right. I like that. Which
I'm sure is similar to a lot of the other ones out there. And then I kind of pulled some of the common ones that I completely disagree with, and maybe we can do that in the end.
Yeah, well, why don't we do some of let's cover the common ones I saw across, like, poking around here. So, and throw out any ones that you may have come across. But see, the biggest one I came across was you need to write every day.
I don't think that's a myth.
I don't think that is either.
I think you have to do that.
I think so too.
I mean, I think there's some nuance, like if you miss a day
there's
or
caviar,
whatever.
Right, there's caviar.
There's caviar to it. Caveats to it.
Caveats.
But I think that's a goal. It's something that you shouldn't give up if you don't, but I think it's something to strive for.
Right.
So we disagree with that. That's right. Very first.
I brought that one up on purpose because it's in everyone had said this, like, you need to write every day, and of course most of them are like, you can skip a day or two, and you might get a little rusty, whatever, but it's like riding a bike and get right back into it and keep doing this thing. And I don't know, I kind of disagree with that. I think, again, of course, they say you need to write every day. I think they take that as 7 days a week, writing 5,000 words a day.
Right?
Yeah. I think it's creating a schedule for yourself where you're consistently writing, where you don't have to feel like you have to get back on the bike.
Right.
You're biking every day. People exercise every day. They go to work out for 30, 40 minutes a day. Finding a consistent pattern so you stick with it, and you like any other activity, you only get better with the more you're doing it.
I completely agree with that.
And I'll be honest with you, I feel like I haven't written anything that I've actually wanted to write, like towards the next book, in like a couple days now. And it's just like I've been distracted, or I'm thinking more about logic issues. I'm too stuck on that. And that's terrible. Like now I'm like way off the bike. The bike has got a flat tire.
So I've got one that's kind of related to this that I actually agree with. A writing myth here that is only write when you're inspired.
That's another common one. Yeah.
But I think you need a routine. You don't wait for inspiration. You structure, hopefully, a daily routine.
Yes.
And yes, it's okay if you miss a day here or there.
Absolutely.
But you don't wait for the muse or inspiration to strike you. You give yourself the platform and the time to come up with some stuff. Because if you wait for that moment where you're super inspired,
you'll never happen.
It may never happen.
Like, it'll never happen. You'd be like, inspiration to hit. I guess I have to go do laundry now, or go to the grocery store.
Right. Other stuff creeps in.
Yeah. So that's one you also disagree with right off the bat. Like,
that's a writing myth that I think is correct.
Am I
phrasing this incorrectly?
I think you are.
you should not only write when you're inspired.
Yes. Agreed. Yes.
So I think, yes. Okay.
Yeah, 'cause I think it's most of the myth is written as the best writing is done when you're inspired. If we're gonna like, but yes, so we're on the same page. I think that's
for me. It's when I'm inspired, I take a note to make sure that when I sit down, at the computer the next day, that I have it.
Yes,
I don't just like stop what I'm doing and then run away from the people I'm with.
I have read articles from working horse writers out there, the ones who are just kind of cranking out stuff, and not like so much where it's like I'm cranking out a book every month, but I'm thinking of an author in particular who I follow. He's written a couple books in like the Aliens series, Scott Siegler, and he's got a bunch of videos on YouTube. I kind of really like him as just his approach to writing, and more so
workhorse? Is it
yeah, exactly. And like I like his approach that way. It kind of fits in my kind of personality of how he writes and approaches work. And his view is like it's his job, So he's got goals he has to hit every day. It's like any other job, Of course, these benchmarks he has to hit every day, and he tracks that and he keeps an eye on it, and that's how he continues to write and do the thing that he loves to do. Sometimes you have to power through those moments of like, I'm not inspired to write. Because if you want to write, you write consistently every day or 6 days a week, not to the point where you're burning yourself out. But I think having that consistent thing will get you through that myth of you needing to be inspired every time you just sit down and write.
I agree.
Other, I think, general ones. So those are the two biggest ones I came across, the, inspiration ones. Writers must read a lot as a myth. I keep seeing that one pop up. I don't know.
I think writers should read a lot.
I mean, it's kind of like doing research, right? It's like, it's like researching your job, what you do.
Yeah.
Right?
And I would even say that while you're writing, you should be reading. Maybe don't read in genre, like don't do things that are going to derail you and get you off base. But I feel like you should be reading almost every day, as you should be writing almost every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, to a point where you're consistent but not to the point of burnout. Like that's.
I mean, for fun. I'm not saying like go write a research paper, but like read for fun.
I think you kind of have to. You have to read within your genre and even outside of it to understand it. And we've talked about that from genre expectations. You've got to read. You have to read those books and know what's going on, what's going out there, because people will pick up books, and if you're not writing the things that they're expecting, people will pick up on that. Unless you've come up with some, great story that changes that paradigm. But I think there's still people expect certain things from certain books, and you have to read and understand what those things are.
Yeah, I think where I landed was that I would do, and I'm doing it now, like before I start writing, comp research about what's out there, what the genre expectations are, making sure that I'm not retreading old ground, I'm adding something new to the conversation. Yeah. While writing, continuing to read, but personally, and this is a personal preference for me, I'm going to avoid genre because it's really hard to not feel derailed when you do that. I know I'm repeating myself here, but like when I was writing the last book, there's a lot of times that I picked up a comp and I was like, dude, I do the same thing. And then I had that moment of like, should I even continue? And anything I can do to minimize those like crises of conscious, I'd like to. But I still think you should read almost every day.
Yeah.
You should be writing almost every day.
Yeah. So, and then there's always like some of the more nitty gritty myths out there that you need to.
Wait, hold on. Is that pompous? Is that like a pompous like thing to say?
What? What's that?
That you should read every day. Is that like?
No.
Go
read a book.
Go to the library.
Go to the library. Like,
get a
read
comic
a
book. I don't know.
Yeah, grab a book and go outside. Get off the internet.
Does subtitles in a movie work?
No. No. Go get a proper book and go read it outside in a park. Would you?
What about Reddit? Does that work? No.
No, I'm not.
Okay. So
get a book. You can be on Kindle, but get a book. Go out there and read, would you? Go, listen to this episode, then go read a book. Click our linky links and then go read a book. No, I don't think that's pompous at all. I think people should be reading. Maybe we're a little biased because this is what we're doing, but no, go read a book. Go see what's out there. Get inspired that way. That's also a good way to get inspired. It's a great example of, only write when you're inspired. Well, if you want to get inspired, read another book and be like, I don't know, that's helped me in the past. I've read something and I was like, I'll tell you, the Blood Meridian, I don't think I've ever felt more lost and felt like what am I doing? Why am I even attempt to read writing? But then also got inspired to be like, oh, I love Westerns. I want to write a Western now, and I want to write a Western horror because this is amazing. So
I think it goes both ways, right? You can read things that you consider super high quality that can inspire you. You can read things that you think maybe are low quality that also inspire you to like, oh, I belong here. I can add my voice to this.
Yeah.
So I've had, all parts of that spectrum.
I like how so far we're kind of myth busters, I think, right?
We're myth busters.
We're myth busters.
Did we find the title for the for the episode?
We might have to change it up here. But now there's I'm going to get into some more nitty gritty myths that are out there, which I kind of agree with, that there's the ones about, you got to be really good at grammar. You got to be, have an education in writing and all those things. I don't necessarily agree with those. I mean, I agree with those, that those are myths. You don't need those things to write. I
wouldn't let it derail you. I think you should have a basic grasp on grammar, and you can, lean on, Google Docs or Grammarly to assist it. But I think in order to break rules, you should know the rules a little bit.
I agree. Know the basics. Yep.
I could at least say that it's a potential tool in your toolbox. So
yes.
Not that like,
that's fair.
I mean, I couldn't tell you what a gerund is. I still forget. I forget what a gerund is. And I remember, in like AP English a million years ago.
Some kid I went to high school with, gerund.
Knowing.
Gerund Smith. He was a kid I went to high school with. Real dick.
Leave a comment about what a gerund is. So yeah. But I do think, like, if you're getting into comma splices, if you're like intentionally making a long run-on sentence for tone or impact, cool.
Yeah.
But if you're making something that's really difficult to read, not cool, right? Yeah. Unless it's like it's all about your intention, I think. Ideally, and the way that I write is I want it to be as easy to read as possible. Yeah. I break rules here and there, more to get attention or more for tone or impact.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't just be like this absolute pastiche of broken rules. There needs to be a flow. And I think grammar sets up expectations of like, eventually, you don't always want to draw attention to your sentences and to your word choice and whatever tricks. You kind of want people, I personally want people to forget that they're reading. I want them to picture things in their mind.
Yep.
And I do think following grammar helps that flow. So maybe we disagree with each other here.
No, I agree that you need to know the basics. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I'm pretty terrible at grammar, but I'll just say it. I've gotten better with it and with the basics, but I was pretty terrible with it. And just going through the editing process was super helpful. So no, I don't think we disagree. I'm on board. I think you know the basics, understand. Like anything else, understanding the rules so you know how to break them is important.
And I'd say, obviously, don't be discouraged, right?
I'm saying, I think I'm going more extreme. Like, you don't need to be some grammar perfectionist, and know like all the ins and outs. And I think we're saying the same thing. So
I agree with that.
Just get the story down, get through it, and again, those are all things that you fix in later drafts anyways, so. And that comes to like another one I came across a couple times was that your first draft needs to be perfect. That's a myth. I think a lot of people maybe think that, maybe new writers do, because maybe there's this nervousness to it. I think I thought the same thing. And then after I read the first draft, I was like, oh, this is garbage. And I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty common, and that's okay. Get it done.
Yeah, I think that's where the editing as you write comes from.
Yeah.
The kind of like polishing what you have just written, which we've talked about before, is just a recipe for never finishing.
Yeah.
I think you need to be really comfortable with the imperfections of your first draft. So 100%. I would agree that's a myth.
100%. Another myth I've come across, and we've talked about this, you need to write about what you know. And I'm purposely bringing this one up because we had an episode about this whole thing. Yeah, I know. I'm stirring the pot. I'm also trying to remember what I said in that episode. So I'll probably say the complete opposite right now because I'm a different person, but we'll see. The myth. So the myth is you need to write about what you know. I think we were like, you don't need to. Like, that's what research is for. This is why you go and explore things. But
yeah, there's a lot of nuance here, right? I do think 100%. It's important to write things that you know. I think there's a lot of truth to it. I think we could argue either way.
Yeah. I think you and I are probably on the same page in this one. So,
I mean, I guess I would say write about what you know, or write about what you're inspired to learn about, but don't just make stuff up.
And don't wait to be inspired to write about that stuff.
Yeah. So when you were writing about fast radio bursts, did you know much about them?
No.
No, you did a bunch of research about it, right?
Yeah, I'd heard
So
about
you were
them.
interested in learning more, and
I knew of them, but I didn't know it's a fast radio burst. I mean, what a stupid name for something. Fast radio burst. Like, it's like, oh, okay, it's a burst of a radio signal. It's moving fast. Okay, sure.
yeah. But then I do think when it comes to like like character relationships, and you write what you kind of write what you've seen or what you've lived. Like there's your lived experience that's there. It's not
Agreed.
all, for me, I feel like personal experience roots fictional characters.
Yeah.
And if you just make up everything, personally, I think they could feel disingenuous. Like if you haven't felt a certain way. And so I definitely put parts of my life and experiences I've had smattered across my characters. They have their own too, but I hope that real lived experience helps ground them a little bit and gives them a certain authenticity.
I'm going to say this, and this is going to be a little off, but I think still in the vein of this whole thing, going back to the history of where these myths come from. I have no idea, but it's funny to see these and you're like, well, these came from somewhere. Someone said this at some point. I know you've said in the past, like a lot of stuff like this becomes like kind of gatekeeping at some point. Maybe someone was saying this to just be like, you don't want to do this thing because you know what do you know? You can't write anything because you don't know anything, or like you don't make any money writing fiction. Everyone knows that. Why would you want to get in this?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting to see like some of these are just, and I mean, obviously they're all kind of debunked, and I mean, some yes are true. Like, do you need to be super proficient at grammar? Do you need to have a education in writing to become a writer? No, you don't. But some of these like higher level ones, like, you need to write about what you're writing every day. These feel like it's just interesting. So it's like, where do these come from? How are these manifesting themselves where now we have to like write articles to bust them so people go out and write?
I think you're right. I think it's like to encourage folks and to make them not feel too discouraged. That's why I think sometimes that like the myths they're adding don't always help. Like the Write Everyday one could help somebody get into a routine who maybe didn't major in writing or English or didn't take any classes. Like you kind of have your own education through it, but that doesn't mean you don't need the experience to do it. I think you need repetition and experience in order to write successfully. Personally, like that's my feeling. So I've got some that I've heard that I think are totally myths. Write drunk, edit sober.
That's like a bumper sticker. Where does that come from?
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, I think it's been bandied about enough that I think that there is, especially for those who are in their early 20s, or like I forget that. I can speak as myself. Yeah. I remember being 22, sitting down with a literal bottle of wine and writing and being like, "This is how I write." And cigarette. It starts bad, and then 2 glasses in, it's just like walking into a party. You get a little more comfortable, and you feel like since you're a little buzzed, it's easier, right? Because like the ideas are coming. I think there is something to be said a little bit for the ease in which words come when you're drinking. Yeah. But it's not repeatable. It's not. I mean, that's alcoholism, right? It's not to say it doesn't work temporarily. It can like get you out of a funk. Yeah. But you don't want to write drunk all the time. You're not Bukowski, like it doesn't end well.
It feels like it feels very like that mystical side of the great American author, right? The Ernest Hemingways and stuff like this, where there's the stories of them just locking themselves in a room and getting tortured. And
that's another one, right? Like the lonely, tortured artist.
Yeah, you don't need that.
No.
you don't need to be tortured to be an artist.
Yes. Yeah. I think I think that there is something to be said about people being drawn to those personalities.
Yes.
But that is not the recipe for a happy life.
No.
Or even repeatable art, right?
Yeah.
You just can't continue to do it. And then I would even say that if for some odd reason you happen to be successful at being one of these tortured, lonely, drug-addled, drinking artists, and then eventually you grow out of it or you get clean, your brand's changed. Yeah. Like
you'll get one book done by the end of it.
Yeah.
You better hope it's good.
So, I mean, I think that ties right to the lonely artist, to the starving artist, all those kind of myths of, isolationist artists. I think it's romanticized and sometimes even marketed as like something that like you need to strive for. And it's a myth. I feel like it's a myth and a really dangerous one, because if writing is about connecting and communicating with folks, you can't do it alone. You need to be talking to people, whether it be fellow writers or family or friends. Like in order to write something that's authentic and relatable, You need to relate to people. You can't just beat yourself up in the corner of a house. There's time, obviously, which ties to another myth. I do think that you should write alone. And I do think that you should set aside time to write. I'm not saying don't do that. Just don't always make sure that there's room. That I'd say that there's a beginning and an end. Like you give yourself 1 to 3 hours to write.
Yeah.
And then before and after that, you give yourself an opportunity to connect with people and participate in the world.
Yeah.
Which will, I think, help your writing and your mental state. Because, writing's lonely enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't need to wear some costume like you're some lonely, starving artist.
Yeah. And again, it's just coming back to I don't want to, I'm not equating this to a job, but there are again, this comes back to if this is something you're professionally pursuing and then you're a professional writing and you work on novels and you get a book out every year or two, you need to have that time. You need to have your own space. You need to have your own workspace. You have to have your own work. No matter what you're doing, you have to have your own workspace to get work done. So it's the same thing. So it's not any different than any other job or any work you would do if you're focused on something. So I agree. That myth is just kind of, that's a get out of here.
I do think writing sometimes crops up, art in general, right, is a potential escape hatch from a 9 to 5. These kind of quote unquote shadow artists who, and I've used it in that way too. And I think it's therapeutic and wonderful to do it. Absolutely. But if you want to dedicate your time to create, a soup to nuts piece of art, a painting, a book, it is a job. You're totally right. It's not just inspirational escapism. It can be if you're journaling or maybe poetry, maybe.
Yeah.
But even prose, but even there, I still feel like I don't want to say workhorse, but there does need to be a seriousness about it and a professionalism to it. Another one that I've seen around is writers are born, this idea that there's some kind of divine, maybe genetic, godly, I don't know, that you come out and you are a writer. I don't think that's at all. I think it can certainly be a learned talent. There could be certain people who have upbringings that make them more predisposed to want to write, but anybody who's interested can be a successful writer. I truly feel that way.
100%.
So in talking to some writers, I haven't seen this online, but I do think that it is a relatively pervasive myth amongst new writers that you don't need to follow structure or research the beats. I feel like you absolutely need to.
That's back to the basic tools you'd have.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference between writing for therapy and as escape and then writing kind of professionally to tell a beginning to end story. I think you do need to know all those tools and all those components to do it successfully.
There's another one. We've kind of covered this, but we've covered an episode too. Writer's block. Right.
So I've seen online that people think that's a myth. I don't think that's a myth.
You think it's real?
Writer's block?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you?
I'm trying to remember what we said in that episode. We may have had a big disagreement on one. That's a tough one.
So I feel like it's absolutely real. What I saw is that there's no such thing as writer's block. There's distraction, there's procrastination, and there are those things, right? But there's a false dichotomy. To me, writer's block absolutely exists. And I think it exists for the reasons why I brought up in that writer's block episode, is that there is a fear of the quality of your work, that your ideas aren't going to come. I think that fear and that kind of cortisol in your, if we're getting a little bit on the brain chemistry side, it ruins creativity. I think as soon as you get into anxiety and that fear reaction, your creativity, that part of your brain is not working correctly because you're focusing on fight or flight or all these these imagined fears, right? So I think that's what writer's block is that your brain literally just can't create for a minute and then you need to kind of reset from it. I
think the way people look at it is there's no way to get out of it type of thing. I've got writer's block, so I can't do anything. Okay, well, are you working too hard and you're just kind of stuck? Or if you're just stuck on something, I remember, and actually in that episode we talked about it. I think some of the ways I got out of this quote unquote writer's block was, go for a walk. Yeah. Get out of your space, go for a walk, get some fresh air. I sit and read, get inspired again and come back. So it's a weird one. I think, for me, it's that self-doubt, man. I feel like self-doubt creeps in
And at least that's one of the reasons why writer's block can manifest, I think.
100% agree. I think there's multiple things that kind of catch you there. I think I came across times, while writing, that I would sit there and was like, okay, where am I starting right now with this? Yeah. And there's ways to get through it. One is like, if you're starting fresh and you're in fresh, clean new page, read the last, chapter or last pages of what you wrote the day before and gets you back into it. Or just start writing something knowing that you can come back and edit that. And I think there's a line of like people thinking there's like a laziness to it, or you're not in the mood to write, which again,
I mean, I think
some days you're not in the mood to work, which is fine, right? Some days you're not in the mood to go to your job.
So, like, if we're looking at the impetus why a lot of these lists exist, and why folks are challenging the myths, is you're right. They're trying to make writing more accessible. Totally get it. I am totally, completely in agreement. So I think the reason why writer's block in here is they're saying, don't worry, you don't have it, you can't have it, doesn't exist, go write.
Yeah.
And to me, that's detrimental because I think it does exist, and I think there's ways to manage it to get past it, not by ignoring it. I think it's a real thing.
I think that's it. I think you just kind of summed it up, and I think we're kind of battering around it. And I agree that it does. It does exist as something, but the key thing is that there's ways to work through it.
Yep.
And I think that's the key. It's not the end all be all. And I feel like the context of sometimes when that's brought up, like, I've got writer's block, is not correctly maybe stated, or the reasons of being there aren't.
I do think like the media examples that we have of writer's block, of like Jack Nicholson in The Shining or things like that, it's not, I think it's a kind of a trope, the writer who can't write. Like even in Alan Wake and Alan Wake 2, there's this idea, like a writer who can't write, needs to go away somewhere and, has mental health issues or something. I don't think that's what writer's block is necessarily. I think that's kind of the romanticized narrative trope of writer's block. And I would say that iteration of it, no, I don't believe that exists.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny. I was going to bring this up earlier too. So a lot of these myths are kind of romanticized and, or I think reinforced in like media, movies, and even books we read by the writers who are, these lonely drunk people who are, you know what I mean? Like,
totally.
It's interesting because it definitely is this weird circle of kind of feeding these myths through the things that we're actually creating.
Yeah.
But it's really just about writers potentially tapping into something that they're feeling, and which multiple other people are also feeling, but they're expressing it in a way that's maybe will come across as like this drunk writer who can only write when I'm alone and locked in my room,
Yeah. This is a little bit of a stretch, but I want to talk about it. It's a little bit of a tangent. But I do think that it ties into back to our myth of write what you know.
Yeah.
Which I think you should.
Yeah.
Unless you want to write about writing. I personally never want to read a book about a writer writing ever again. But it happens a lot in horror. So there's an author who one of his characters is an author, whether it's the main character or a B story character.
Yes.
If their stories are coming true, if they're losing their mind, anything, for me, that takes me completely out of the story. I've seen it so much.
Yeah.
It's like when musicians hit that point of eating their own tail when they write music about touring or writing music, and it's like I can't relate to you. Like who's the subset of your audience? You're writing to people who have, I don't know, become best-selling authors.
Yeah.
Such a small subset. But personally, it's like it's too close to home if a writer's writing about writing.
I mean, I actually haven't read many books where that's a scenario, but I've seen
maybe it's a genre thing. Like I as I said before, I'd gone through Ghost Story by Strauss, and there's a writer in there, and his stories are coming true, and I'm playing Alan Wake, and his stories are coming true, and it reminds me of it just happens a lot in horror where the Ninth Gate and The Shining, and I think maybe it's not satisfying for me personally.
I'm okay with that as well. I mean, I agree because I mean, again, I haven't read many. I mean, all the ones you've listed I know of, but
just one of those tropes I'm like completely over.
What else any other ones you want to cover here?
Yeah, I got one that it's a myth that I think is actually true, at least personally. Characters take over the story.
I've seen that one.
I won't say they always have to take over the story, but I would say allow your characters the room and the freedom.
Yeah.
To take over the story. Once again, I think it's one of those myths that's kind of shared to not gatekeep writing.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty cool feeling when your characters when you have a good enough handle on your characters, when they begin to feel like they're making their own decisions, like, no, it's not otherworldly, and then no, it's not a haunting or something.
Yeah.
But when you're in the shoes of that character, allowing them the freedom to make something that maybe betrays your outline, or, you know, their dialogue changes, or they make completely different decisions that change your plot, I think a little bit, you should leave the room for that. Because I think that's, if you're surprised, if your characters are surprising you, you are potentially surprising a reader. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
So outlines are super important, but I do think that the freedom to change them and have your characters evolve and grow from away from your first conception of them is a really cool thing to give them space to do.
This myth feels like one that is overly exaggerated, and other writers are taking it too serious. I think other writers or people who are trying to offer this advice and these myths are taking that thing I think they take a lot of these things too seriously, but I think that one in particular, because I agree, give your characters room to breathe, but it's also knowing what your characters and their decisions that they would make in a situation. I think that's where it's coming from. Like, let them kind of help you get through it. My own story, I've written something where I'm like, this character wouldn't do this. What am I doing? And I think that is like the letting your characters take control of kind of the, you know, what's happening. I think it's understanding who they are, understanding their behaviors, understanding their motivations, understanding their flaws. And I think that's where it's about, like, you're letting your characters take control and knowing what decision that they would make, you not imposing all of a sudden based on things you've already created for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that tends to happen, right? Like, probably end of Act 1, Act 2, like, you've lived with them for a while.
Yeah.
Like, you can't know your characters until you write as them for a while, I think. I think if you're sitting with them for 5 hours a day, or even an hour a day, whatever you're doing. Yeah. I do think that your perspective of them will change, and what the story needs from them will change.
Yeah. They're not actually writing the book for you. Don't be so literal when you read these, you know, everyone out there, don't be so literal when you hear these myths. Like, no shit, you've got to write the words and write the story. Like, don't be so literal. I think that's what it comes down to. But that is a good one. That's a good one, because that one definitely comes up. I've heard that one quite a bit, and people call it a little cliche, and where it's like, stop taking it so literally and serious. Like, it's
and the last one, and I won't say for all writers, but one that I think is true. Not that they have to be always, but writers are obsessed. I think there is an obsessive nature. I think it's hard to not live your story. You don't need to be obsessive and ramble on about it to people who don't want to listen. No. But there is an obsessive component that when you're writing a story, it creeps in the shower, before bed, when you're walking, and when you're away from the computer, the story continues, which is why, like, I think writers are consistently taking notes, whether it be on their iPhone or on note cards or in a journal, about their story, because that's just how your brain works. Like, you've got a problem in a puzzle and you kick it up, and your brain just goes on solving it and putting things together. I've had so many ideas away from the computer that I've taken notes on and come back to. And I think that there is an obsessive nature to it. Like, I've never felt so focused on something for so long.
Yeah. I mean, is that kind of not that I'm no psychologist over here, but I mean, isn't there a line of, like, if you're that invested and passionate about something that you're doing, that you become obsessive? It tends to be a really negative word, but I think it could also be like, you're that invested in it that you are thinking about it on your off hours.
Yeah, you're excited about it, man. Like,
I think that should be the you know what, that's the word to be used. Excited, not obsessive. Like, I'm excited about this thing. Obsessive has this negative connotation to it, which, yes, it can be if it's bleeding and ruining relationships and the way you're living, and you're now all of a sudden locked in your room and you're drinking and writing. I mean, I would tell you, man, if I would ramble on about writing to anybody that would listen to me. I know I can't. This is why you and I do this once a week, so we get it out, so we don't ruin our friendships. Everyone's like, oh, here he goes. I felt it happening. You know, at first, like, my wife was like interested, and then it was like, okay. Time. And so I'm like, okay, no more talking. No more talking about that. And even, like, if it's like a barbecue situation or a school pickup, I give myself like a 30-second clip. And then I'm like, if anyone's... and how are you doing? No, then I just let it go, right? Because I could talk for hours. Oh, yeah. And then it's like, oh, man, that weather, kind of crazy, huh? How about them Red Sox, huh? Who gives a shit about that stuff? Like, yeah, it's cold out. I know. I'm right here. I saw what the score was last night. We all know this. Come on, move on. Let's talk about something interesting. I think being excited is different, because I think I think there's a positive side to that. There's a positive thing about being excited about something you're invested in, and you hope that you're surrounded by people who are also supportive and excited for you. Obviously, don't be so excited where you're obnoxious.
And once again, I think it's a gatekeeping thing. I think the folks who are writing these up don't want people to feel like if you're not obsessed, you can't be a writer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think on the flip side,
that's okay. You don't. I mean, but I will say that if you begin to care about what you're writing, expect it to start creeping in. There'll be a bleed. It bleeds into the rest of your day. It can't not.
Yeah, I think that's a good little point there too. If people, maybe that's a myth. Like if you're not obsessed,
right,
that you're.
No, you need a routine, I think, but I think eventually the obsession creeps in. I think it happened to me.
Me as well, and especially when I'm in it, my brain is just focused on this thing, and I'm trying to get myself back into it. I've
got one more myth that I wholeheartedly agree with.
One more myth.
You ready for the last one? I think this is the topper.
I think this is it. Give it to me.
Getting published will make you happy.
Oh yeah, no.
I don't think it will. No, I think that's a huge myth. I think writing has the potential to sometimes make you happy, and sometimes be fun, and other times be miserable and not fun.
Yeah.
But I think if there's this arrival fallacy, like marriage or something, if I just get married or have a baby, then I'll be happy. If I just publish this book, then I'll be happy. Yeah, I think it's a very hollow victory.
I agree. I think you need
maybe hollow goal.
Yeah, and not put something like that on such a pedestal. I think the success is obviously different from person to person, however you measure that, but I don't think putting something like that on the pedestal of like, this is what's going to make me happy. I think completing the work. I think getting to the end and getting to a point where you're like, I completed this thing.
You accomplished this thing.
Isn't this awesome? And yes, it is. I think
even the mini goals, right? I think, you set a word count. Maybe it's 100 a day, 500 a day, 1,000 a day. These little goals along the way, you get these little dopamine hits, like you have little goals, little goalposts that you're reaching, you're crossing. For me, if you're writing for the adulation of the final product, a really, really small subset of writers will get any adulation, right? Will get any attention for what they write. And I think the ones that get it, still don't think it makes you happy. I think you can write your whole life. You can write novels your whole life as long as you don't get discouraged because you're not getting the praise that you want.
Yeah.
Think about it. You could do anything you want your whole life as long as you don't want to be praised for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I don't know. I published a book. I was like happy as like I completed. It was like the next goal that I completed, but it wasn't like the end all be all. And then I'm like,
the book opening. I think that was awesome.
I was like, actually, what made me happy was sharing it. That was fun. And then I think what makes me happy is working on the next one.
Even me, right? So like I'm querying right now. The book's done. That made me happy. I'm querying. That's making me sad. but the thing that's giving me like oxygen again, that's making me happy, is the next story. I'm starting to put that puzzle together and starting to outline that. That's where I personally am getting that positive reinforcement, that dopamine, that energy to keep going and keeping it up. So,
okay. I think, I don't know. I feel pretty good. We covered a lot of myths there. We kind of covered the good ones. We covered the ugly ones, the good ones, the ugly ones, the bad ones, the good, the bad, and the ugly ones. And I feel pretty good about how... busting? Yeah, I think we busted a lot of them. I think we agreed with some of them. I also think a lot of them are just exaggerations, and people just need to not take them so seriously and be like, take everything with a little bit of, caveat, a little caviar,
Maybe that's the deal, is that it's really hard to have nuance in a bulleted list on a clickbait website.
Nailed it. So what you been reading or watching anything lately?
So I just started Little Children by Tom Perrotta. He's the guy that wrote Election and The Leftovers.
Oh, okay. Leftovers is the one that's on. Tom Perrotta. I know him. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's good so far. I'll say his writing is really brisk. It is like eating a bag of chips. It's really easy to read. And not that it's simple. It's just that I think he's got a good handle on character. He uses pretty easy word choice. He's pretty good at painting a scene.
Yeah.
Coming off of Ghost Story, which was like really thick, but it was more like eating sand. Or even Don DeLillo's White Noise, which is wonderful, but still it's a thick read. There's a lot going on. Parada seems very focused on story. It's not really drawing attention to how clever he is as a narrator or writer. It's just so far really easy to read. I can't tell if I'd recommend it yet. It's still in early days. It almost feels like a romance novel. I know it's not.
Interesting. Yeah.
But it's like it's a critique on, maybe not a critique, but not even a satire, an example of suburban married life with kids.
Yeah.
It's like a very suburban story. So I thought it would be more along the lines of White Noise, because that really is a critique and a satire. But this feels very grounded in a way, and it feels comedic in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll let you know. So far it's good. I'm definitely going to pick up some more of his books just because they're easy breezy. They're nice to read so far.
It's what a
palate cleanser.
I didn't put together I loved The Leftovers, the show on HBO. I was really into that. He was a showrunner for that one. Our favorite guy to love to hate.
Lindelof.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And I was like, oh, this is him kind of, okay, all right, I can deal with this. I didn't know that there was a novel. I would probably check that out because I really enjoyed that series. But what a tone change from like Election. Like I'm thinking of the movie with like Matthew Broderick and oh god, who else was in that? But
Reese Witherspoon.
That's it. And that was like kind of like this little satire, dark comedy kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, which I think that The Leftover, I don't know. See, I haven't read the book, but going by the tone of this book,
like, right?
Yeah, it'll be interesting because if it's the same tone, then I can see comedy being in that story, right, and absurdity being in that story. That even though in the HBO show it felt very grounded and dire.
Yeah.
So it'll be I'll definitely check it out and read it because I'm not sure. And Lindelof, it's funny. Like one of the reasons why I finished The Leftovers was because I was like, it's based on a book. There has to be an ending.
Yeah.
Like they must have planned an ending. Because that's always my fear with him is that it's this mystery box, J.J. Abrams joint where it's like, we're just writing to write and we'll make up the ending when we're working on the third season. But I think that The Leftovers book, I don't know if it covers subsequent seasons.
Yeah.
I think some of it kind of goes off, but don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure.
I'll have to read it. But I was really into that show. Great connection, Tom Parada here. Born and raised in New Jersey. Currently lives in Boston. Well, not Boston, but in Massachusetts, in Belmont.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm impressed with his writing. I think he's super, super talented. I mean, if you can, it's one of those books where the words melt away. You know, it's really easy to picture the scenes and just be in it. So, and then as far as watching, not much. I'm playing Alan Wake 2.
Nice.
It's about a writer who's the stories that he's writing are coming true.
Maybe you should stop diving into the media of these stories about writers writing as writers.
They're pervasive. Like Alan Wake 2 is actually quite great. There's another protagonist. Her name's Saga Anderson, and she's an FBI agent. And that's more of like this procedural Seven type story that's going on that kind of intertwines with the Alan Wake story. So it's great. It's a huge improvement over the first Alan Wake, and the story so far seems pretty interesting, minus the writer writing about writing. How about you? What are you watching? You reading anything?
I've been a little lazy lately. Reading wise, I'm almost done with. I think last time I just started Darkness Take My Hand by Dennis Lehane. It's the second book in his crime private investigator series, Kenzie and Gennaro. It's really good. It's serial killer stuff, which is kind of fun, all around Boston, which is fun. I think I commented before, this is only the second book I've read from him, but I'm going to continue reading his stuff. Just the way he structures paragraphs and scenes and just his writing in general is a very nice smoothness to it. Similar to what you're saying. It sounds like the Tom Parada where you just kind of, you move it along. It kind of pulls you in. And I think the way he's writing and structuring his words plus the story itself is just kind of a fun crime mystery. And I'm still working on Dune Messiah very slowly. I kind of paused on that because I wanted to get this book done so I can load up my Kindle with more library books. And then as for watching, I have not been watching anything really. Been watching Letterkenny, and I need something light. I need something light in my life, so I've been watching that. I absolutely love that show. And if you're interested in terms of writing and very quick, witty stuff, that show is fantastic.
We made it a few seasons in.
Yeah.
I think we might have faded off around season 4. And then I kicked up Shoresy, which was okay.
Love Shoresy. Well, as a hockey fan and a hockey player, Shoresy is just right.
I mean, I'll kick it up.
Yeah, it's only 2 seasons.
I can't watch those around the kids. Any of them around the kids?
No, definitely not. But Letterkenny, yeah, it's good. They're I love how they get into some of their rhyming, very word play moments. It's kind of fun.
Yeah,
and sometimes it's tough to keep up with. But yeah, kind of enjoying that just for like something a little lighter fare.
Palate cleanser.
Yeah, palate cleanser, I would say. I was watching that show Yellowstone. I just got through the 3rd season, which is probably not very much something I would go for, but everyone kept talking about it. And
you got a problem on the ranch, right?
Yeah. Another problem on the ranch. I got another problem on the ranch here. Family. It's all about family. I'm going to do whatever I can for my family. Another problem on the ranch. So it's fine. There's good and bad things I think about it, but that's maybe for another podcast. So yeah, that's been it.
All right.
So that's it. I think we're wrapping this up. So thanks everyone for listening. What are we doing next? Next episode, we are getting into
finding your voice.
Finding your voice.
I couldn't find mine for a second.
Did we do that on purpose?
Yes,
was that purpose tension building? Maybe. Could we not find our voices? Yes, that's what we're gonna do next episode.
So I got one little stinger here for those who stuck around. I've got the definition of gerund for you.
Not a high school friend of mine. I looked him up. He wasn't actually.
No, it was not Gerard Smith.
He does not actually.
Gerald Smith.
Yes, he actually doesn't exist. Gerard Smith doesn't exist. He's no longer
gerund
existing.
Is a word?
You're okay.
Yeah. Gerund.
Go ahead.
Gerund is a word like swimming. So in a sentence, it would be, I've always enjoyed swimming. So it's when a verb functions as a noun.
There you go. Look at us.
Gerund. Grammar experts.
Myth busted.
Myth busting.
It was one of those ones when you said it, I was like, oh, I remember what this is. Is that just the ing thing? I didn't think of that until afterwards when we read it. I was like, it's just the ing thing mostly, but I know there's more to it. There's going to be grammar people listening to this right now and be like, ugh. That's great. I'm glad we did that. If you enjoyed the episode, you should share with someone else. Share it with a friend. You can follow us on Instagram, Writer Syndrome Books. We're still on Twitter, Writer_Syndrome, but probably not for very long.
Yeah, not a great place.
You can subscribe and follow us wherever you listen to us, and on YouTube at Writer Syndrome. And you can go find all of our episodes. Reach out to us if you're a writer, author, or just want to reach out to us with ideas, topics, or want to interview. You can find our contact information and all the other episodes at writersyndrome.com.